for hosting this important event. And as a quick side note, let folks know if they're interested, I will be actually in the UK from the 10th through the 12th of November, and would love to meet up with anybody that's interested in talking in more detail and depth about this. So I'm going to start my presentation, which is called the Transatlantic Biomess, how UK climate solutions are leading to forest destruction in the southern US. My name is Scot Quaranda, and I'm the campaign director at Dogwood Alliance. Dogwood Alliance is an ENGO based in Asheville, North Carolina, that works to protect the forests and communities and biodiversity of the southern United States. We were founded in 1996 and have been working on this issue for a number of years now, and really glad to have the opportunity to speak to y'all. In terms of southern forests, most people, when they think about forests, they think about beautiful places around the globe, like Indonesia or Brazil that you heard about earlier. But southern forests are a real jewel. They're an incredibly special place. Moving to the next slide. Southern forests have the highest concentration of tree species diversity in North America, the highest concentration of freshwater aquatic diversity in the world. There's one area in China that may be equivalent, and then the highest concentration of wetlands in the US. So it's a place of incredible diversity. Moving to slide 4, we have 150 different tree species, 1,400 herbaceous species, and 2,250 total plant species. So it's an incredibly rich and diverse place that deserves equal protection as any special place around the globe. And unfortunately, the biomass industry looks at it as a place for destruction rather than preservation. So I wanted to highlight a couple other areas before I dive into the impacts of the industry itself, one being the green swamp and the Great Dismal Swamp, which is slide 5. Green swamp is an area that's within the sourcing region of some of the biggest pellet companies being founded in the southern US right now, including Enviva. It's home to a wide variety of carnivorous plants like the Venus flytrap and pitcher plants that are endemic to the region and found nowhere else in the world. And so we don't necessarily have the kind of charismatic megafauna that you'll find like Siberian tiger or orangutan, but we do have incredible species that you'll find nowhere else on the planet. Another beautiful area is the Cumberland Plateau, which is the area that I was speaking of earlier that has the highest freshwater aquatic diversity in the world. If you go to slide 7, you'll note that this looks at total species richness and endemic species, and if you notice the red areas on both of those maps, those are areas that are in ground zero in the heart of where the wood pellet industry is exploding in the United States to create wood pellets for export over to Europe. So these are areas with incredible species richness and great diversity, and plants and animals that are found nowhere else in the world that are certainly in need of protection. And we already have, if you look at slide 8, we already have a huge footprint in terms of global roundwood production. We basically have 2% of the world's forests in the southern US, yet a lion's share of the global wood output, almost 20% of that pulpwood. And sadly, what we've seen is that even though this is an area that's been hit very hard, it's an area that's also looked at as, again, a major area for expansion. So what we've seen over the last few years, Dogwood Alliance works in the marketplace. So over the last few years, we've been really working with big customers of paper companies and big paper companies themselves to adopt environmental policies that change practices in the woods, that end some of the worst of the worst practices like large-scale clear-cutting, conversion of natural forest to plantation, massive use of toxic chemicals in the management of forests. And these companies have adopted these policies voluntarily, but we're seeing great change in the woods. Now we have a whole new industry coming in that's going to dramatically change the landscape and kind of set back all of the progress that we've seen made. The next slide looks at timber production in the south, again, just to show what big percentage we have going into timber production. And then we really look at what these impacts are. So right now what we see in the southern US is that between 5 and 6 million acres, and I'm sorry that I'm not versed well enough in hectares to make the conversions for you, but 5 to 6 million acres are clear cut every year. mostly for paper production. What is anticipated is that if the wood pellet industry and biomass industry continues to grow, those numbers will double to 10 to 12 million acres per year, which is a huge impact when you consider that we only have about 200 million acres of forest. That would mean that if every acre of forest was available, we would literally clear cut all of our forest every 20 years. The next slide shows another huge impact, which is maybe one of the greatest concern for us, which is conversion of natural forest to plantations. We have 42 million acres of our forest as plantations now, which basically means 1 in 5 acres is a plantation. And we use more chemicals, fertilizers in our forest than the entire world combined. What we see with the growing wood pellet industry and a biomass industry is the need for further conversion in order to keep up the rates that they want. But at the same time, the wood pellet industry is mostly interested, especially companies like Drax, are mostly interested in hardwood pellets for their co-firing. So we're going to see a lot more pressure put on our national forests, a lot more conversion of plantations to keep up with all other needs, and it truly is a disaster. And what that leads to is in slide 12, you'll notice the number of endangered species in the region, and we have high off-the-chart numbers on endangered species across our region. This doesn't include over 250 other species that environmental groups in the U.S. are trying to get listed for the region. And you may ask, why did the South why is it such a large producing region? It's because if you look at the next slide, Buffalo Bill's Wild West, we're basically the Wild Wild West. 90% of the forests in our region are privately owned, and they basically lack all legal protections. So in Europe, as I understand it, it varies nation by nation, but every country has a different policy around forests about what practices are acceptable and what practices aren't. Can we log old growth? Can we log wetlands? Can we log endangered forests? What are the sizes of clear cuts? Things like that. In the South, where private property rights are sacrosanct, you can do anything that you want, basically. All forest standards are voluntary. So there's almost a double standard between Europe's expectation of their own domestic supply and then what they're willing to accept from our region. I think it's also worth noting that these numbers will continue to grow, and one of the things that companies will try and hide behind is the issue of certification, which you may or may not have heard from previous speakers. But in the South, our dominant certification system is a system called the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, SFI, which is in partnership with PEFC, which I'm to understand is big in Europe. The SFI allows all of the worst practices in the woods. So again, large-scale clear cutting, logging of endangered forests, conversion of natural forest to plantation, widespread use of herbicides and chemicals in forest management, all of it's fair game. So anytime a company claims that, don't worry, forests are being logged sustainably, if they say the reason why that's the case is SFI, well, they're lying to you. Or